I'm JD and welcome to my channel. Please subscribe, please hit like, and please share my channel with others. I am an amateur watchmaker who focuses primarily on pocket watches. These little beasts that strike my curiosity on the occasion and are just amazing to work on. I just love these things. Very passionate about my work. And I know over the years, having done a lot of work on pocket watches and using all the tools I have and all the lathes I have and all the techniques I have, I've always had to refer to a few manuals. The manual you're looking at right now is, I would say, the best manual for a watchmaker to have to begin the journey into watchmaking. There are other more complex books out there, as well as videos out there that you can watch to teach you on how to, or instruct you on how to do various repairs on watches, but this little baby here is the best. So it's called the Watch Repairer's Manual, and it's by Henry B. Fried. I'm going to say Fried because that's probably how he felt after he wrote this manual. Totally fried. This is, for me, a gospel in watchmaking. I have other books. I've done a video on all the other books. I have the Bull of a School Watchmaking Manual. I've got some other books that may have more detail, but this one in general is probably the best one. So I just want to do a quick flip through this book so you watchmakers out there could really appreciate this book. Because I've had many questions over the years on which book do you think I should buy. So I just opened this up, and it, just like one of my university professors years ago, it kind of made that never been open sound. It cracked a lot. So this is the Watch Repairer's Manual by Henry B. Fried, 2nd edition. This is a reprint. I believe I got this on Amazon. So it's got a preface or preface, first published in 1949. And there's an ISBN number here, but you can get this on Amazon without any issue. So and it just describes the purpose of the book. So let's look at the content here. So it goes through the modern watch and a little bit of the history of the watch. It goes through the train, the winding mechanism, the escapements, bearings, all the different parts of the watch. And then after it does all that, it goes through cleaning and overhaul of a watch movement. So, and that is a very interesting and good section for you to read, and also what tools needed for the job. So this is important because you need to actually pick up quality tools to do watch work. If you pick up crap, then even though you may have the skills, that the skills you have will not translate to good work on a watch. You'll end up damaging the watch if you don't have the correct tools. A lot of the tools I've bought over the years are vintage, and they were made for pocket watches specifically. You can buy watchmaking tools, but the vintage ones are excellent. So, and you can still get a hold of them on eBay and Etsy and some of these other places, or go on the web. Then how to case a watch properly. And this deals with the dialing of the watch, fitting of hands, tightening of hands, broaching hands, which I've done before, lengthening hands, fitting the movement in the case, fitting the stem length of the stem, filing a hole in the case, 3-piece cases, waterproof cases, self-winding watches, and summaries and test questions. So they're even testing you in this book here. And then adjusting the Canon pinion. I discussed that in a recent video. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but so you've got all of this, then you've got mainspring repairs and how to work with mainsprings, how to make a stem, which is really interesting. I've done this twice now, and if you follow how to make a stem, this section, then you will be able to make a stem. There will be no issue with actually constructing a stem. Fitting a balance staff. This is excellent as well. I've referred to this many times, how to remove the hairsprings and removing the rollers, all of these things. I'm good at it now. I don't really have to go back to this section of the book because I know how to do this. Most of these things I'm pretty familiar with and confident I can do it with no issue. How to make a balance. So every time I make a balance, I actually go back to this section because it's just got a very simple explanation of how to make a balance on your lathe. I have videos of me making balance staffs. This is a balanced staff, not a balance, by the way, so I might have screwed up. So it's how to make a balanced staff, and I've done this quite a few times, and I always refer back to this. Even when I punch a balance out, and I'm going to actually replace it, I always go back to see if this is a friction fit balance, is it a riveted balance, how do I do those special balances that have the collar in them, that are riveted. I had a few of those. I always go back to make sure I don't damage the part, right? Then adjusting a balance staff, how to make it shorter, how to reduce it. This here is good. This whole section here is good in this book. So if you've got this book, read it every now and then just to keep you up to date. It doesn't hurt to reread this stuff every now and then as well. How to true a balance, truing the flat and truing the round. I showed you a caliper that I had in one of my videos recently, and I do have a video online on how to true a balance, and it's actually a balance that I had to true that I made the video for. So how to poise a balance. So this is like poising your car tire to make sure it's perfectly, how do you say it, balanced? Can I use that term when you're talking about balances? And it's removing weight from screws. I know how to undercut a screw to remove weight, and you undercut a screw with a special tool. And I think I put that tool in what is this tool? But there is a tool for undercutting screws to remove the slightest bit of weight when you're poising a balance. And there's also adding washers, weighted washers to the various screws, the mean time screws on the balance to actually get that balance poised properly. So it's a very good section here to reread this section before you go to poise a balance. Replacing a pallet jewel. I don't usually have an issue. I don't usually have to go back into this one, or replacing a roller jewel. I know how to actually shellac a jewel back on, but you can read that again to make sure you're not screwing it up, and how to adjust it once you've got it shellacked into position. Causes of overbanking. That's another one. Cracked rollers. Adjusting pallet guard fingers. I've had to do this. That's a good section. Putting a watch in beat. I've had to do that. That's a good section. Collating and studding a hairspring. I've done this. I got a very expensive tool that's used for vibrating a hairspring, and this section here shows you how to do that. And then some general repairs, as it says here. And it gives you a description, use of the staking tool punches. You should read this section here, because you look at all those punches and go, okay, I've got punches and stumps, and how the heck why do I have all these things? What do I use them for? Read that, it'll give you some ideas next time you have a watch to fix. And then troubleshooting, basic logical sequence of troubleshooting, and that's pretty much it. As I flip through it, I'll just flip through really quickly, okay? It gives you a breakdown of the watch movement and all the parts. Winding mechanisms. It gives you another breakdown of a watch movement here, and it gives you all the names of the parts in the watch. I'm guilty of not memorizing all the names all the time, but I do know where the ratchet wheel is. I do know where the crown wheel is. Ratchet wheel, crown wheel. And I do know one thing that's very important I want to mention is that little screw over the crown wheel is often turned in reverse to loosen. So it's not righty-tighty, it's righty-loosey. So you got to watch out for that, because you could damage the screw if you try to turn it the wrong way and the head comes off. There was a watch expert online who I watched his video today, and he actually mentioned that a lot of times the reason the watch can't be, the actual watch can't be wound properly is because someone screwed up the screw here. So keep an eye on that screw and which direction it should turn, and don't overturn it. Look it up if you have to. So, and it's got all the parts of the watch, and you should use the proper parts when discussing watches with other watchmakers, or trying to get a part. So, and good illustrations. These are photos, so they've actually taken some photos and given very good diagrams on the watch train and how this all comes together and works. And there we go, all the way from the winding mechanisms all the way through the barrel, and then all the power going through the train to the escapement and then to the balance. And there's a photo there, which is kind of cool. So, and they've actually, it's Rotherham and Sons Limited provided this photo. Yes, back then in 1940 something, photos weren't that popular. I think they were. Anyway, this is a nice photo too. It shows you the roller jewel and some other things and how it all kind of works together with the pallet fork. I know when I first started doing watchmaking, I was always, okay, which direction do I put this pallet fork? Because it kind of looks the same, and if you flip it one way, it won't work. You flip it the other way, it does work. So this little diagram is very helpful in determining which way your pallet fork goes, and which way the guard finger goes in this here, and if there's problems with the guard finger. So anyway, gives you a breakdown of the modern watch and all the different parts, and how the winding pinions work, the crown, the clutch. It's just like in your car, there's the clutch right there, and then intermediate setting wheels here. Those are setting wheels, intermediate setting wheels, the minute wheel and the hour wheel, the Canon pinion, how all that thing interacts. And you've got to know that if you're fixing a watch, you just have to know how these things work. A nice little diagram of how pinions merge or interface with the leaves. These are leaves on the pinions, these are teeth. So you got to use the right terms anyway. These are leaves, these are teeth. And there's math involved in the amount of teeth and the amount of leaves. Anyway, that's that. And then there's this part of the book here just gives you another breakdown of your disassembling the watch. And it gives you some hints on how to take off the hands properly. I use levers to take the hands off, like this diagram over here. So I don't use this device here, although I have it. I don't use it. I use levers. And just various types of watches here we have. These are not pocket watches, obviously. Cleaning and overhaul, a lot of good information. How to peg out a jewel hole properly. Always peg from small to large, by the way. So you start off at the smallest jewel hole and you work your way up. Because if you start with the biggest jewel hole, then the peg wood's not going to form itself right. So I start with the smallest peg hole, work my way up. So you may do it a different way, but too bad. So oiling, how to oil, diagrams on how to oil properly. I've got videos on how to oil on my channel, how to put just enough oil, how to actually take the oiler out of the oil. If you take the oiler out quickly, it leaves a lot more oil on the oiler than if you took it out slowly. So there is technique in making sure the right amount of oil goes on that watch. So then there's a summary after that. Read that. How to case a watch. I'm not going to talk about this much. It's pretty obvious. See if I can see anything that's odd. The only note to make here in this casing a watch is it shows you how the what are they called? These are the why did I forget the name of this? They're calling them dial legs. I hear them called dial feet, actually, not legs. So the dial feet, I got a video on how to solder dial feet that I made with my dial feet soldering machine. The one thing here is that you've got to work the face off so that it's usually 3 dial feet. In this case it's 2, but you don't want to bend the dial feet, so you want it to come straight up. So you use your screwdriver and you twist until the thing comes up. So don't screw up your dial feet, and don't tighten them too much either. There's a screw there on the side that you just saw in this here that tightening those dial feet. Tighten them too much and the dial feet get damaged. And fitting hands, I've made a couple of videos on hand fitting. I think the critical thing is what I said in my last video, is that when you put your second hand on, then you put your hour hand on. You can put it on anywhere, because you're just going to take the crown and move that hour hand around, and just make sure there's clearance between the hour hand and the second hand. That can be tricky. When the minute hand goes on, the minute hand goes over the hour hand, it also has to clear, and there's usually a bend on the end if it's a pocket watch. If it's a watch, then it goes straight out. And you just have to make sure that it's low enough that it's not hitting the crystal that's on the top, right? Because then it's not going to work as well. Oh, they've got these little buggers here, which are dial washers, and you have to have a good dial washer in here, because that holds the hour wheel down on top of the Canon pinion so that it meshes properly with the minute wheel pinion. So make sure you put a dial washer in. Go find some dial washers on eBay. You can't live without them. So there we go, some examples here, and then there's examples of how to make the hole smaller on a hand. So tightening hands, that's pretty cool. I've broached hands before when I didn't have a hand that was right size, and I had to make the hole a bit bigger. So there's tools for that. And then as you go through here, let me see if there's anything else. Lengthening of hands, I haven't really had to do that. And then I think we're looking at what are we looking at? Fitting a stem properly. So hopefully it has the old stem. All right, what do we have here? Just some general problems with crowns here and fastening the crown. When I put a new crown on, just use some Loctite on here. You don't have to use the stuff that'll never come off. You can use the medium Loctite on there, because when you're turning the crown, you're usually turning it in the clockwise direction if you're looking straight down on it. But it'll stay on nicely with a little bit of Loctite in there. So waterproof cases. I did make a video. I've got one of these as well, a pressure tester for my dive watches. This gives you a nice breakdown on how all that works. Adjusting the Canon pinion. So I've had to do this a few times, and usually the Canon pinion needs to be tightened just a bit. And this shows you a very nice technique of tightening that Canon pinion right there. And there are stumps that are in your staking set for tightening the Canon pinion, and there also are tools you can buy to just do that. So this book has that, how to do that on the Canon pinion. I'm not sure how to loosen the Canon pinion, but notice that when he's staking this Canon pinion down, he's got a piece of steel in there so you don't crush the Canon pinion, that it stays big enough. So you want the Canon pinion tight enough so that it hugs the minute wheel, the minute pinion, and then it also is loose enough so when you turn the time for through the crown and the stem, that the actual minute wheel goes around. So I think that's right. I'm dreaming of it in my head here. So I could be singing a song right now. This is what I normally do in my videos, but I'm not going to. Replacing the Canon pinion. One thing I thought I've done recently is, instead of pushing the Canon pinion straight down onto the watch face with my tweezers, what I do is I get a stake that fits over the Canon pinion and leaves the actual gears of the Canon pinion, the wheel on the bottom of the Canon pinion. I guess it's called a pinion on the bottom of the Canon pinion. Go figure. It presses against those. That instead of using your tweezers to push down, it's basically gives you equal force on the Canon pinion. So find a stake that fits just over the Canon pinion and use a stake to push the Canon pinion down. You can tap it down lightly. Pushing it down usually works. So I do that. That's a new technique. And then testing the Canon pinion, make sure it's tight enough to work. So read that section. These are mainspring repairs. I can't go through all this, but there's a couple of them here that I've done. The repair where I've actually had a mainspring and bent over the mainspring and put a new leaf on it on the side. This is a pretty cool repair, but you gotta actually anneal and temper the metal. So you gotta soften the metal up, bend it over, soften it, bend it, soften it, bend it, and then once you've got it bent, then you've got to heat it up again, plunge it in so it's not snappy hard, but it's just hard enough. So I've done this job and it worked well, and that's if you've got the hook type barrel on your watch. And it gives you, see the tongue ends, it gives you the technique. I've used this technique to actually do this. In this case here, they're taking the end, they're making a little jobby do thingy higgy flippy thingy, and then they're taking the metal and sticking it in. So these T ends are a pain in the butt. I'm going to use the B word instead of the A word. They're a pain in the butt only because when you reinstall it in the barrel, sometimes it slips out of the hole. So I hate those T ends, but gives you some advice on how to actually make a T end on there. So if you have to. So there's some good repairs there. And there's a nice little repair here for actually tagging or turning the end of this so that the hook, the hole, goes into the barrel hook properly, right? Because I've had that problem. So mainspring problems are fun. That's all I can say. So this book covers the basics on that, right, on how to deal with it, and the basics on winders, mainspring winders, and how to use those. But I don't think I've ever done that. I did do a video the other day on actually reshaping the center of the mainspring to fit around the arbor. So I did a very precise video on that. And this guy's showing a method of squeezing it in, I guess, but that's kind of dangerous. So, not sure. But anyway, you should read this section. And it's got self-winding watch mainsprings. you know, and these are the ones that slip, and putting grease in the barrel so they have enough friction to work, but not enough friction to keep them from moving. So how to make a stem, this was good. I used this. I cut a stem on my lathe. It's a very precise method of how to make a stem. You can read that. You have to have this part on your lathe, otherwise you're not going to be able to file the stem flat properly. So you need that tool on top of your flip over tool rest. So I did use this. Excellent, worked well, no problems, no complaints. How to make a stem. So there you go. That is an excellent piece of information that is in this book. You're not going to find in many other books. And that's fitting a balance. So this is a lot of good information. I would occasionally just read this so you know exactly what you're doing when you're working with balances. The only comment I have here is that for the removal of the hairspring here section, they have this device where they put that down the center and then twist it and pull up the collet. That's dangerous as hell, because you can in fact crack the collet on the other side, right? So this collet is I've cracked a collet before. That's all I can tell you. So I use 2 screwdrivers underneath and then twist them. Very small screwdrivers. If you've got one of these tools or you want to make one of those tools, go ahead, because that'll work, and it shows you how to make the tool, which is kind of neat, right? Then removing rollers, that's the only comment I have on this thing here, is if you've got one of those double rollers that are attached, then you're not going to be removing it by punching it out a certain way. So you have to punch it down to remove that. So you have to have this on a surface, to basically punch this down to come out. I think it gives you a figure on how to do that here. So you're not pulling this up, you're pushing the balance staff down and releasing the roller that way. So I think I tried to use a normal roller remover where you pull up on a single roller, and I've had rollers that are 2 rollers but not attached, so they're double rollers but not attached. When it's 1 unit, you can't do that. You got to punch that down. So this book shows you how to do that, and it's very good. Read it often. So it talks about friction staffs. It gives you all sorts of advice on how to deal with staffs and how to take them out and put them back in. I've cut staffs away on my lathe that are questionable. Normally I use my tool that I put into the staking set, and I'm allowed to tighten it up and punch it down without damaging the arms of the balance. So that's what I normally do. So this book shows you all about how to do that, right? Just great visuals on the book. There's that tool there I just talked about. So it's a cutaway of the staff remover, it's called. What a great name for a tool. It's used for removing staffs, so let's just call it a staff remover. So if I asked you what the desert is in Antarctica, what would you say? I'll give you 2 seconds. It's called the Antarctica Desert. Isn't that amazing? People just aren't using their creativity enough. So this one is a very good tool. I have this tool itself. A little peek hole here. You can look, make sure it's over the thing. You tighten it up, and then bam, you punch the staff out. Works really well. It shows the different types of staffs, how to measure a staff. It's kind of neat that they have a drawing kind of illustration here. But you use that. So when you order a balance staff, you have to give all of these dimensions, like the lengths and the widths of the various parts of that staff, in order for the vendor to understand that they have given you the right staff. So where the hairspring fits on, where the actual balance fits on, the hairsprings on this side, balance, roller table on this side. Make sure you give 100% of the measurements so you don't have an issue. So I think this also talks about thickness and problems with balances and all kinds of stuff. The chances of fixing a pivot, by the way, is close to 0 once a pivot is bent. To bring it back without it breaking off, very difficult. I don't recommend it. I just recommend putting in a brand new balance. So that's about different types of what's this? Selecting a drive. This is all putting balances back in. So replacing roller tables. The only advice I have here is that you can actually narrow the hole in a roller table. So if you try to punch that roller table back onto the balance and it seems to be loose, you can take a round stake, and a very small round stake that's just slightly bigger than the hole, and then punch down on that, and it'll move the metal inward and allow you to use that roller table again. I've done that. It works really well. It's a great thing. There is a tool, punch, that has stars on it. It's like it's shaped It goes kind of like like a star, and you can use that actually to narrow the hole as well. I used that before, which is kind of cool. It's got 3 of them, I think, 3 stars on it, or 3 pointed ends, and you punch down and you rotate it once, and then you punch again to get in between where you punched before. So I may have given you guys a tip on that. Right, so here's the golden section, Jerry. It's gold, Jerry, gold, I tell you. This is how to make a balance staff. Now this part of the book is gold, Jerry. So it gives you all of the dimensions of the staff, but what I look at, the measurement of the staff, right, as it sits in between the balance cock and the lower plate of the watch, and where the pivots lie, and so you've got enough end shake, but you're really taking the old staff and using it as a replica to make a new staff. If you don't have the old staff, there's information in here that'll help you build a staff to fit into a watch, but you may have to do it a few times because it's going to be some trial and error. So what it does is it tells you what to cut first, which I think is brilliant, right? So it's showing the various dimensions and what to cut on the balance first in order to make a balance staff. So I just recommend, I'm not going to go through this in detail. I've made quite a few balance staffs, and I've got some videos on how to make a balance staff. I've had some friends out there, Mr. Tasconi, if he's listening at all and watches my videos. He helped me years ago on how to do lathe work, and I was able to cut a balance staff within 4 months. And so thank you very much, Mr. Tasconi, for your help. Pretty cool dude, works out of New Mexico. I think Mexico, maybe. Anyway, so I've done this. It's fun. It's actually a fun job, and when it works perfectly, then it's great. So the gravers I use are flat and round, so I've got a round tip graver, and I have a flat one like this. My gravers are 4 millimeters across and 2 millimeters flat, and then 4 millimeters and 2 millimeters domed. And I use the dome part or round part in order to cut the cone, the cone on the pivot. So that's pretty much the only place I use that for. But I use the 4 millimeters to do my rough in work, and I use the 2 millimeters when I get close to getting close. This is the deuxième gauge, which stands for 12. So anyway, probably units of 12. But the gauges I have measure in millimeters. So when I measure you measure on this end, and you can just quickly measure how close you are to the size you need. And when you're doing it, you're using the balance itself anyway to fit it on, test fit it, and then take a little bit more material away, test fit it, and take more, test fit it. But your initial cuts, you can use this deuxième gauge to actually measure your initial cuts. Should I go and grab the deuxième gauge? All right, I got a few gauges here. This is supposed to be for removing the roller table. I think this is a roller table one here. Didn't work. Anyway, this is the deuxième gauge. I've got 2 of them in there. So this is it here. So it's pretty cool. It's easy to use, and you can very quickly measure that balance staff on this end and look down and see where you are. And this measurement here is in millimeters. So I can go up to 10 millimeters, and usually you're looking at 5 millimeters and 8 millimeters and that kind of stuff. So that kind of length, but this thing is just perfect. This one was made in England. I'm not sure if I've got another one in here, but I got a ton of tools in here. These are my specialty tools. So some of them are easy to find, some of them are harder to find. This is the one that you use for actually replacing an impulse tool. So anyway, that's the bundle of tools, but that's a deuxième gauge. You need to get one of those. You can't live without it. All right, moving right along here, Jerry. My name's not Jerry, by the way, it's JD. So here he's showing how to cut it away after you've cut all of this, and you've cut the back part away, and then you have to part the metal here. That's the proper term. So you're parting the metal. He's measuring it here. You're parting it, and then you end up flipping it around to work on the other end. So, but again, in this book, it shows you exactly how to do that. Here they're basically shellacking this staff into a piece of metal here, right? Piece of brass. You don't need to do that. If you've got a lathe, just do this. Use your lathe, and you can do the whole balance staff with the lathe and the collet on the lathe. You don't need to do any shellacking or anything like that. It's maybe the old days they did that, but you don't really need to do it. Here they've got a really good tip here. So this is how to center something. So all you do is spin it, and you take a piece of pegwood. Don't tighten your lathe completely, and as you're spinning it, this will center itself. So you can do that with your lathe. Here they've got something shellacked into a cone-shaped piece of metal with a cone-shaped cut in it. But you can do that with your lathe to center the piece. Take a piece of pegwood underneath and just push up just a bit as it's spinning, and it'll center that nicely. So then there's a whole section on how to adjust the balance staff, and read that, because if the balance staff isn't working properly, you might have to remove material from it, you may have to shorten it a bit, you may have to do a lot of things. So here they're using an oilstone slip here to actually thin down the pivot on the balance staff. So I've made a video on the J-Cot tool. So I think somebody said, hey JD, thanks for making the video, but now the price of J-Cot tools have just skyrocketed because everyone wants one, which I thought was pretty funny. So anyway, you can use a J-Cot tool to do that. You can do it in the lathe. Anyway, that's pretty good. It gives you, again, a description of a pocket watch, and it's just this is really nice because it shows you how to work the pivot with your stone or with your burnisher. So I have a Bergeron burnisher. On one side it's a burnishing device, so it's a piece of metal with the lines on the side, and it hardens while it's smoothing out the material. On the other side it's actually a file to remove material. So I use both, plus I use a stone, so an Arkansas stone. So there we go. They're showing you how to burnish properly, and you use the rounded part of that file right there. See, that rounded part is for that cone right there, and the other parts are square. So if you've got a J-Cot tool, you can work on the pivot on the J-Cot. I think this book also might show a J-Cot. Well, I have one of these as well. I've got one of these pivot lathes here that are pretty useful, but you know, I haven't used it very often. I wouldn't say you need to use this very often. I think you could do without one of those. And there we got the J-Cot pivot lathe that they describe on how to use that with a bow. The big hint I had is that you don't actually need a bow or have to use a bow. You can use one of those ID card things here, and what you do is you take one side and you jam it underneath where it's attached here, and then the other side goes over the top like that of this J-Cot gear or whatever it's called, whatever A is here. What did they call it? It says permit pivot A to obtain firm seating and groove C, whatever. Anyway, that little wheel there, you want this to go over there, and that way you just pull that back and forth, and that runs the lathe really nicely. So it gives you good hand action. So as you're actually pushing the file one way, or the burnisher one way, you're rotating the actual part the other way. So it works really good. So this got a good description of how to use the J-Cot tool, which is very nice, and how to use the burnisher. This is actually the burnisher I have right here. So I think it's not the exact burnisher because it's just a picture, folks. Come on, get real. The other thing is when you're putting the part, which is usually a balance you're putting in here, but in here they've got a gear they're putting in there. Rolex Corporation still uses these, by the way, when they burnish the pivots on their parts. So there's a lady whose only job is to burnish pivots. Oh my God, I probably would hang myself if I had that job. Anyway, so the professional pivot burnisher, put that on your resume. Anyway, it shows you how to do it within the J-Cot, and the J-Cot also has these lanterns. So these are the ones that groove where you sit it down. These are called lanterns, and you stick the pivot through the hole in the lantern at the right size, and then you can work the pivot. As it shows here, you can work an angle on the pivot, so it's got a little tiny bit of an angle. It's not completely flat. So anyway, it's removing burrs from the edge of the pivot. So that's a great information on the J-Cot tool in here. Who would have thought that this would have all that information? Oh, here they've got the roller table here, and these little diamonds are where you punch down with that special punch that I told you about. So you do it once, and then you turn it, and then do it again, and that'll tighten up your roller table if it's loose, right? Pretty cool tool. Adjusting the hairspring collet. This is tricky stuff. Any hairspring work, like the hairspring's too close to the collet and the collet's not right. There's information on how to do that. How to loosen a collet or how to tighten a collet. More how to tighten it. That's the problem you'll normally have with a collet. But collets, they can snap so easily. A hairspring collet going around like that, they'll snap without an issue at all. So I wouldn't recommend farting with the collet too much when you're working with a watch. Usually they'll be taken off and go back on without a problem. Here you're looking at truing a balance. I did a video on that as well. I just did a video recently with a nice little tool that I have. I've got a few of these, but I had that one that you put your finger in to hold it. You normally would not have to true a balance unless somebody was farting around with that balance previously and caused it to be out of flat or out of round, and then you're truing it with your fingers. It's funny, they give you a tool when you buy one of these devices. They give you a tool to use to true the balance, and then you never use it. You always use your fingers and you grab it and twist the balance to actually get it true to flat. It tells you to use your fingers here even, so to bend it. And then here it's got some other advice if the balance is totally effed up. This is like ridiculous. Somebody would have had to totally mangle that balance. So I'm not sure. I'd find out who did that and report them to the police. And then they're truing the round here. Again, they're adjusting true to round in the balance. And here they're using, I've done this before where the arms are not completely flat and you have to adjust the arms. Here I think they're stretching a short arm by peening it, right? Which is stamping down on that metal with this stake, and that's peening the metal, and it'll lengthen it just a bit. You're not going to lengthen a lot using this technique, by the way, but I have used stakes to actually flatten that balance, the arms of the balance out a bit when they've been off just a bit. So there's that tool for bending it, by the way. So it's a pretty extreme situation. I don't even know if I've ever had to use that tool. I've always used my fingers. And what do we have here? This is holding the actual screws in the right order, so when you put them back you don't screw it up. Which is a good plan. So a lot of good stuff on balances. This is a whole section on how to poise a balance. I'm not going to go through this in its gory detail. It's a long job, but if you have a perfectly poised balance, which means once you've blown it with a puffer, this thing does not stop in the same place every time. It stops at a different place because it's perfectly poised. So this here is good because it tells you the method of identifying the different balance screws, and the mean time screws on the balance would be right here, and these screws can come in and out, and then there's these screws here which with the arm, and you can screw these in and out to speed up and slow down the balance too. The other ones are temperature screws, so if you want to play with that, then fine. Somebody asked me today, they wrote me and asked what the tool was that I use. Well, here it is right here. These, I've got a whole bunch of these actually, because I just kept picking them up whenever I saw one. Here it is here. And the beauty of this tool here is it's like a little vise, but the beauty is you can use your thumb to close it. So you press it like that and it closes with your thumb. That way when you get the balance, and you're trying to remove a screw from the balance, you just grab it with this tool like this, and you can tighten it pretty good, and then you very carefully turn it with this tool. So what's it called? Remember this. Somebody can write me and say what these things are called. I know there's a name, I just can't remember it right now. Anyway, we'll call it Thingamajobby Doohickey 2. So, and as I go through this book, I'll probably remember what it's called and let you know. So that's a necessity, getting one of those tools for holding those screws. I mentioned it earlier, removing weight from a screw, and with an undercutting tool they look like this, and not often done, I don't think. Usually the balance has a problem because somebody put weighted washers in underneath one of the screws, or the screws are not in properly. So it's usually that problem, or someone has replaced the hairspring with a different hairspring, and now it doesn't work. But there's good information on how to do that. There's timing washers here, so they put weight on there and to slow down the watch. So it slows it down. There's a timing washer. I think this is a bit big. It's showing you how the washer is beyond the actual diameter of the screw, which is not a good idea. So again, good information on all of that. And here, replacing a pallet jewel. I've done this 2 times, I think. So shellacking in back to pallet jewel. This is not an easy job to do, by the way, because you have to have it absolutely perfect or it won't work with the watch. But they've got very good advice on how to do that and how to actually shellac in the pallet jewel left and right so that they work properly. So this book is one of the few books that has that procedure in it. But you have to have the right tool to align that pallet jewel, or you're doing, you know, you're doing trial and error is what you're doing. So for unlocking and locking. So good book, good section. Replacing the roller jewel. So this is very good. I just showed you the tool earlier. One thing is when you're replacing the roller jewel, I put the piece of shellac on top here. Then I put the jewel in loosely. You can use spit on the end of your tweezers to hold the jewel as you're putting it in. That's a technique I've seen. And then you can get to rough in the shellac there, and then you can heat it up and then adjust the impulse jewel so it's perfectly seated. So here you go. There's the impulse jewel. So this tool here is actually fit into right in there. It's in the mouth of the pallet fork. And this just tells you the dimension of that jewel. So if you have to buy another jewel, there's a jewel here that you need to know that opening. So you have to buy this tool. Not hard to find. So it's a jewel gauge, or I think a jewel pin gauge. Anyway, not hard to find. And again, look on eBay. Most of your jewels will be this type, by the way, and not these types, the oval type. Most of them are this type for pocket watches. So that's a pretty good section there. Then it shows you how to use a lamp to heat up the tool. This illustration shows the watch balance with the hairspring on it, and you're clamping onto the roller table here. I don't recommend that. I recommend taking off the hairspring and before you replace this jewel, so you don't damage the hairspring with the heat, because you're applying heat right here, and it's radiating down through here, and there's a chance of it getting to that hairspring. I recommend taking off the hairspring, putting the jewel on, reinstalling the hairspring. And all you do is mark the stud on the hairspring here. You just mark the balance with a marker, so you know exactly where that stud was, so you can retain your beat error. So, and here you go, there's the flaming away, and you're grabbing that little thing there. And in this case, they did take off the hairspring, thanks be to God. And you're heating that up, and you're either putting in or taking out that impulse jewel. Got to make sure it's straight up and down. I usually do, and I usually eyeball it, which works well. Just get up close, that's all. Cases of overbanking. This is a bunch of theory on overbanking, and maybe you can fix your watch because you got too much power going to it, and you're overbanking. Distorted roller table problems, crushed rollers, guard pin problems. I've had that where the guard pin was too long, so I had to correct the length of the guard pin because it was getting jammed in the roller table. Was getting jammed as it went through here, the gap in the roller table. The guard pin was wrong, so I had to fix the guard pin. You got to fix your guard pin. Adjusting the pallet guard fingers. So this is something you can do as well. I'm not sure. I don't know if I've ever done that, but it gives you a good technique on actually adjusting these fingers and adjusting the guard pin or guard finger as well. So how to make a guard finger. So you can make one, you can stretch it, you can remove it. You have lots of fun with a guard finger. So this book handles all that really nicely. So look at that, for proper length of a guard finger. Single rollers, so it gives very good advice, right? So how to put a watch in beat. I've got to do that within the next couple of days for a watch that I'm working on right now. And it shows you how to align all this up so that when the pallet fork is when the balance is at rest, the impulse jewel is sitting into the mouth of the pallet fork, and the pallet fork is exactly in between these two pins, right? Which are used actually. Oh my God, my brain is going. It's in beat if it's in between these two pins anyway. So there's a technique for doing that. It shows you how to actually adjust like where that hairspring is, because you have to rotate that hairspring so that the so that this is between the banking pins. You have to be able to look at that to make sure it's in rest, it's sitting there, and then you test it. And if you test it and it's not, and it's over to the left or over to the right, you have to move the hairspring in the opposite direction. So this is got good information on how to do that. I've seen guys do this here, this device. They like put it on a bounce tack and then stretch it down a bit, or let it hang, then get your thing in there and move it. I've done that. It's doable, but it's tricky. So you don't want to damage the hairspring. So that's scary stuff. So you can do that with a very small screwdriver, putting it in the slot of the collet here and then rotating it ever so slightly. So that's putting a bead in there, so it's really good section there. And then colleting and studying a hairspring. You won't have to do this very often, but I've used this as well. You've got to go on eBay again and find pins. So you need to actually find pins that will help you collet that hairspring properly. It shows you how to do it and how to break the pin off. I've done this. I did it for a very old English watch once, because very old English watches need that kind of stuff happening. They also have, how to work on different types of hairsprings here. And what else do they have? I have this table, by the way. I didn't know what it was when I bought it. I bought it, and it's for hairspring studding table. And it didn't have the grooves. It needs to be filed in to put the grooves in there. But I have a hairspring studding table. It's pretty cool. If you need to see that, let me know and I'll show you that tool, right? So a lot of good stuff on hairsprings here. And then a whole section on general repairs. That is not the guy I served with in the military, general repairs. That's a joke. Oh, and a really good section on the various types of stakes and what they're used for. So this is a very good centering punches and hole closing punches and peening punches, and all of that. So that's a good section on how you got to know your staking set. Know your staking set. Damage roller caused by the 3-corner punch. So that's what I told you before. That punch is called a 3-corner punch. If you punch that too hard, it could crack your roller. And that's if your roller's loose and you want 3-corner punch to make that hole smaller, grab the actual balance staff. So use the 3-hole punch. It actually worked really well. I tried that. So troubleshooting is like when this stops, that stops. I think you just get better at troubleshooting, but the book does have some basics on how to troubleshoot. Sufficient power, and then there's a bunch of appendices here, terms and conditions, and anyway, this is American watch sizes, French watch sizes, some conversion tables for you in the back, and what do we have here? We got more types of movements, how to order watch parts. Yeah, you need to be able to identify that watch. Go to the Pocket Watch database, pump in the serial number, and then pump in the type of watch it is, and it'll give you all kinds of information that's needed to actually order parts. And then there's an index here if you want to find something, and that is the end of the book. And as they say in the Catholic religion, go, the mass is ended. So anyway, that's my review of this book. This is the book to get if you're a watchmaker, and I would recommend occasionally reading it. You can also get the Kindle version of this and having it on your Kindle or your tablet, so you can easily access it and then read some stuff every now and then. So you can read right through it and learn a lot, or you can worry about the next problem you have. Go to that area and read the heck out of it so you understand it. So anyway, I'm JD, and thanks for watching my video. It's a bit long today. But I wanted to do a good review of the Watch Repairer's Manual. So thanks a lot. Please subscribe, share with your friends. I've got 4 watches on the bench right now I got to get at. The cottage is closing soon, so the wintertime will allow me weekends to work on watches. So thanks a lot. Another piece of advice before there's shaky hands. Look at that, I got shaky hands. Actually, my hands are fine. Another piece of advice is if you're not rested, don't work on a watch. So don't be tired and say, I'm going to do some watch work. You need to be well rested to actually do work on watches and not screw the watch up. So that's my recommendation. Be well rested. Try not to have any coffee in you so your hands are nice and steady when you're using your screwdrivers or other tools. And someday I'll call you up again and I'll tell you what these things are called.